Greetings viewers, welcome back to the channel. In today's video we're back with the 2010 Outback 2.5i. This is the Outback that I replaced the torque converter in. If you recall from that video, the first video, we were driving the car and experiencing a little bit of sound from the CVT transmission and showing the stall outs. We also had some wheel bearing noise, and today we'll be replacing the left front wheel bearing on this Outback. The bearing has not failed yet. It does not have any play in it, but it does have a lot of noise. So we're going to go through the process of getting this wheel bearing replaced with a genuine Subaru wheel bearing hub assembly. And with that said, we'll go ahead and get into the repair. Starting off, we'll go ahead and get the front wheel out of the way. Lug should be 19 millimeter. From here, we're going to go ahead and knock loose our CV axle nut. CV axle nut will be a 32 mil, like just about every single Subaru. All right, from here, we're going to need to remove our ABS wheel speed sensor and remove the caliper and caliper bracket from the spindle and secure it out of the way. All right, our ABS wheel speed sensor is located here on the front side of our spindle, held in place with a 10 millimeter bolt. Remove the bolt and remove the sensor. Be very careful with the sensor. They can be rusted into place. They are plastic and they can be broken fairly easily. You can take a flathead screwdriver and try to slowly wiggle it under the flat of the sensor and gently pry it from the spindle. Like I said, just be careful, you don't want to break this sensor. There we go, sensor is out. Got a clip up here. If we squeeze the tabs together, we can release it from its mount just to get it further out of our way where we're not going to accidentally hit it or break it. So just pop it out and we'll tie it up here or set it inside the strut assembly just to keep it out of our way. Now we'll move around to the back side of the spindle and remove our caliper and caliper bracket. All right, onto the back side of the spindle now. Here's our caliper brackets here. We got one 17 millimeter headed bolt here, one here. Remove those and we can remove the whole caliper and bracket assembly. And we'll hang the caliper up and out of the way. Now we need to remove our brake rotor. All right, now we need to remove the brake rotor. This car has a little bit of rust on it, so this rotor will not come off by hand. So I'm going to take a hammer, beat around it a little bit to free it up. Hopefully it'll come off. If not, Subaru provides you with 2 threaded holes, one on either side here, that you can put a bolt into, and when you tighten the bolt, it'll pull the rotor off of the hub. Theoretically, if you live up north and you got a super rusty Subaru, they'll probably just round out and or break off before they pull the rotor off the hub. All right, now that we've gave it a couple strikes to get it to free up a bit, we're going to put our bolt in there. Trying to figure out the bolt size. The 12mm bolt that we pulled out of the strut up here that holds the brake hose in place is the correct size and thread for the brake rotor. And there we go. All right, now that we've got the brake rotor off, we can go around to the back side of the spindle and remove the 4 bolts that hold the hub assembly in place. All right, now that the brake rotor is out of the way, we can access the 4 14mm headed bolts that hold the hub into the spindle. They're kind of tight, but you should be able to get in here fairly easily. If you take your thumb and push the axle in just a hair, you get just enough room where you can put a universal 14mm socket on there and turn these bolts out without having to remove the axle or take any suspension components loose. So just go around and remove all 4 of these bolts. All right, now that you've got all 4 of the 14mm bolts removed from around the hub, you can remove the hub wheel bearing assembly. All right, hub's out. As you can hear, it's really crusty. So go ahead and get our backing plate off the hub for our brakes. Let's wiggle that back and forth. Take a wire brush to all this stuff, clean it up since we got some rust going on, and get ready to put in the new hub.
All right, wire brush to clean up the loose rust, and then some brake parts cleaner and a rag to clean up everything else. Try to get all the junk out of the bore. All right, so I've got our new hub and bearing assembly. Sorry, you can't read that. Part number is 28373AG01A. And there is the shiny new hub bearing ready to go in. Probably going to put a little bit of grease on the inside splines so our CV axle stays nice and lubricated and does not get rusted in place. And the installation will be reverse of removal. We'll put our backing plate onto our hub and bearing assembly. We will slide our CV axle up and spline it to the new hub and bearing. And then push it into the spindle. We're going to clean up the 4 hub bolts. They did have a little bit of corrosion on the threads where they come through the hub and are exposed. And once we get those cleaned up on the wire wheel, we'll go ahead, reinstall them, and torque our fasteners to specification. And we can put the front end of this Outback back together. All right, got the bolts all cleaned up. We're going to go ahead and start them through the spindle into the new hub. And we'll just take our ratchet and 14mm socket and go ahead and get them started. And we'll tighten them up and just use them to draw the hub into the spindle. All right, now that all the hub bolts are in and hand tightened, we're going to go back and torque them all to 65 Newton meters. All right, now that that's all torqued and down, we can go ahead and reinstall the CV axle nut. Not just by hand, we don't want to torque it down yet. All right, we're just going to snug up the CV axle nut by hand real quick. Now we'll reinstall our brake rotor. Followed by our brake caliper. Now that we've got those tight, we're going to go ahead and torque them to specification, which is 120 Newton meters. All right, now we'll reinstall the 12mm headed bolt that holds the brake line to the strut. And we'll reinstall the ABS wheel speed sensor and its 10mm bolt. All right, now that we've got that done, I'm going to stick a small punch into our vent to lock the rotor to the caliper, and we're going to torque our CV axle nut to specification. Now we're going to torque our CV axle nut to 220 Newton meters. Remove the punch. We'll take a punch or a chisel and stake our CV axle nut to the CV axle. All right, now we can reinstall our front wheel. All right, now we'll torque the lugs to 120 Newton meters. And we're done. Real quick out on the test drive, and as you hear, it is nice and quiet inside the cabin. We no longer have that roaring wheel bearing noise that we had from the previous video.
And that's it. That will conclude our video on replacing the front hub bearing assembly on a 2010 Outback. This video is applicable to 2010 to 2014 models. Pretty sure the 15 to 19s are fairly similar as well, and the 05 to 09 is pretty similar to this as well. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one.